Hi, boys and girls. Today I'm going to read you another one of my favorite books, which I bet a lot of you have heard, Enemy Pie. And it's by Derek Munson and illustrated by Tara Callahan King. And after I finish reading it, we are going to make an enemy pie. And the one tool, important tool you're going to need to make this enemy pie is a hammer. So let's get started. It should have been a perfect summer. My dad helped me build a tree house in our backyard. My sister was at camp for 3 whole weeks, and I was on the best baseball team in town. It should have been a perfect summer, but it wasn't. It was all good until Jeremy Ross moved into the neighborhood right next door to my best friend Stanley. I did not like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me when I struck out in a baseball game. He had a party on his trampoline and I wasn't even invited, but my best friend Stanley was. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I never even had an enemy list until he moved into the neighborhood, but as soon as he came along, I needed one. I hung it up in my treehouse where Jeremy Ross was not allowed to go. Dad understood stuff like enemies. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies too, but he knew a way to get rid of them. I asked him to tell me how. Tell you how? I'll show you how, he said. He pulled a really old recipe book off the kitchen shelf. Inside, there was a worn-out scrap of paper with faded writing. Dad held it up and squinted at it. "Enemy pie," he said, satisfied. You might be wondering what exactly is an enemy pie. I was wondering too. But Dad said the recipe was so secret he couldn't even tell me. I decided it must be magic. I begged him to tell me something, anything. "I will tell you this," he said. "Enemy pie is the fastest known way to get rid of enemies." Now, of course, this got my mind working. What kinds of things, disgusting things, would I put into a pie for an enemy? I brought Dad some weeds from the garden, but he just shook his head. I brought him earthworms and rocks, but he didn't think he'd need those. I gave him the gum I'd been chewing all morning, and he gave it right back to me. I went out to play alone. I shot baskets until the ball got stuck on the roof. I threw a boomerang that never came back to me, and all the while I listened to the sounds of my dad chopping and stirring and blending the ingredients of enemy pie. Well, this could be a great summer after all. Enemy pie was going to be awful. I tried to imagine how horrible it must smell, or worse yet, what it would look like. But when I was in the backyard looking for ladybugs, I smelled something really, really, really good. And as far as I could tell, it was coming from our kitchen. I was a bit confused. I went in to ask Dad what was wrong. Enemy pie shouldn't smell this good. But Dad was smart. "If enemy pie smelled bad, your enemy would never eat it," he said. I could tell he'd made enemy pie before. The buzzer rang, and Dad put on his oven mitts and pulled the pie out of the oven. It looked like plain old pie. It looked good enough to eat. I was catching on. But still, I wasn't really sure how this enemy pie worked. What exactly did it do to enemies? Maybe it made their hair fall out, or their breath stinky. Maybe it made bullies cry. I asked Dad, but he was no help. He wouldn't tell me a thing. But while the pie cooled, he filled me in on my job. He talked quietly. There is one part of enemy pie that I can't do. In order for it to work, you need to spend a day with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to him. It's not easy, but that's the only way that enemy pie can work. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Of course I was. It sounded horrible. It was scary. But it was worth a try. All I had to do was spend one day with Jeremy Ross. Then he'd be out of my hair for the rest of my life. I rode my bike to his house and knocked on the door. When Jeremy opened the door, he seemed surprised. He stood on the other side of the screen and looked at me, waiting for me to say something. I was nervous. "Can you play?" I asked. He looked confused. "I'll go ask my mom," he said. He came back with his shoes in his hand. His mom walked around the corner to say hello. "You boys stay out of trouble," she said, smiling. We rode bikes for a while and played on the trampoline. Then we made some water balloons and threw them at the neighbor girls, but we missed. Jeremy's mom made us lunch. After lunch, we went over to my house. It was strange, but I was kind of having fun with my enemy. He almost seemed nice. But of course, I couldn't tell Dad that, since he'd worked so hard to make this enemy pie. Jeremy Ross liked my basketball hoop. He said he wished he had a basketball hoop, but they didn't have room for one. I let him win a game, just to be nice. Jeremy Ross knew how to throw a boomerang. He threw it and it came right back to him. I threw it and it went over my house into the backyard. When we climbed over the fence to find it, the first thing Jeremy noticed was my tree house. My tree house was my tree house. I was the boss. If my sister wanted in, I didn't have to let her. If my dad wanted in, I didn't have to let him. If Jeremy Ross wanted in, "Can we go in it?" he asked. I knew he was going to ask that. But he was the top person, the only person on my enemy list. And enemies aren't allowed in my treehouse. But he did teach me to throw a boomerang, and he did have me over for lunch, and he did let me play on his trampoline. He wasn't being a very good enemy. "Okay," I said, "but hold on." I climbed up ahead of him and tore the enemy list off the wall. I had a checkerboard and some cards in the treehouse, and we played games until my dad called us down for dinner. We pretended we didn't hear him, and when he came out to get us, we tried to hide from him. But somehow he found us. Dad made us macaroni and cheese for dinner, my favorite. It was Jeremy's favorite too. Maybe Jeremy Ross wasn't so bad after all. I was beginning to think that maybe we should forget about the enemy pie. But sure enough, after dinner, Dad brought out the pie. I watched as he cut it into 8 thick slices. "Dad," I said, "it sure is nice having a new friend in the neighborhood." I was trying to get his attention and trying to tell him that Jeremy Ross was no longer my enemy, but Dad only smiled and nodded. I think he thought I was just pretending. Dad dished up 3 plates side by side with big pieces of pie and giant scoops of ice cream. He passed one to me and one to Jeremy. "Wow," Jeremy said, looking at the pie. "My dad never makes pies like this." It was at this point that I panicked. I didn't want Jeremy Ross to eat enemy pie. He was my friend. I couldn't let him eat it. "Jeremy, don't eat it. It's bad. I think it's poisonous or something." Jeremy's fork stopped before reaching his mouth. He crumpled his eyebrows and looked at me funny. I felt relieved. I'd saved his life. I was a hero. If it's so bad, Jeremy asked, why has your dad already eaten half of it? I turned to look at my dad. Sure enough, he was eating enemy pie. Good stuff, he mumbled through a mouthful. And that was all he said. I sat there watching them eat enemy pie for a few seconds. Dad was laughing, Jeremy was happily eating, and neither of them was losing any hair. It seemed safe enough, so I took a tiny bite. Enemy pie was delicious. After dessert, Jeremy rode his bike home, but not before inviting me over to play on his trampoline in the morning. He said he'd teach me how to flip. As for enemy pie, I still don't know how to make it. I still wonder if enemies really do hate it, or if their hair falls out, or if their breath turns bad. But I don't know if I'll ever get the answer because I just lost my best enemy. Well, the end. So now, are you ready to go make some enemy pie of your own? I will grab my hammer, because this is the tool you're going to need, and head to the kitchen. Okay, boys and girls, here we are in the kitchen. And I guess you probably already know the secret, the real secret to enemy pie. And Jeremy's father, actually knew what the secret was. Not Jeremy's father, the pie maker. He knew it was the golden rule. And I bet you know where the golden rule comes from. You're right, the Bible. And the golden rule is, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. In other words, treat people the way you want to be treated. And that means being nice to even your enemies, and it'll work. So, I thought it would be fun to make some enemy pie. Now, what you're going to need for your pie that's so easy to make, doesn't even take any putting it in the oven, but it does take some hard work with the hammer. Now, I started out with Oreos, and I put my Oreos in a big bag, freezer bag, and so it's kind of nice and thick. Now, if you want to divide up your Oreos, if there's more people in their family who are going to work, you could put it in a sandwich size bag, but these aren't as thick. So I think if you're going to do it that way, you're going to want to double bag it before you start hammering. Now, because I didn't want to hurt our counter, I put a towel down and this, put my cutting board, and then I just started hammering away. Well, I've been working on this for a while, and after you work on one side, you flip it over, and you work on the other side, and you get them all smushed. And then you're going to need a pie pan. Well, I used my blender. You could also use a food processor if you don't want to hammer. But it's kind of fun to use the hammer. Now, I took what I'd already made and put it in here, but I had to add a little bit of butter. And I melted my butter in the microwave, and I just put it in a little dish like this and covered it, and I actually didn't even need all that I'd melted. But I poured the crumbled Oreos in, put the butter in, and then I just used my fingers. Now, I washed my hands right before I read the book, but I did touch the book, so I'll just do a quick little wash again, just to make sure hands are clean. If you're going to be working with food, you want to have your hands nice and clean. And then I just started smushing. I mixed in the butter and started smushing and worked it up. You don't even have to work it all the way up to the edges. But once that gets in there, you can take any kind of ice cream you like. My favorite happens to be mint chip. And so you're just going to scoop it in on top of your pie crust. And it's pretty easy to do. I let the ice cream sit out a little while to soften it. I suppose I could have just put it in the microwave if I'd wanted to. But there we go. I think I'll get another spoon out to help. Here. Help get the ice cream off the scoop. And like I say, you can use whatever kind you want. Get that out of there, still a little bit hard. And then you just smush it down and kind of try and get it even. It probably should have been a little bit softer because you're going to put it back in the freezer once you get it all smushed down. And you know, sometimes if I have chocolate sauce, I will even add a little bit of that on top of the ice cream. But I don't have any, so it's not really necessary to do, but I think I wanted a little bit more ice cream here. There we go. Oh, this is going to be so delicious. Now you can call this enemy pie or friendship pie, whatever you want to call it, but you know, you do need to remember how important it is to be nice. And especially these days when you're home, I think some of the people that it's hardest to be nice to are the people in your very own family. I remember how I used to fight with my brothers when I had too much time around them. But anyway, so it'd be nice if maybe you guys could work together on this. If you have brothers or sisters, or you could each have your own little bag to do the pounding. And once it's all pounded, this looks pretty good now. I will just open it up, and this is what kind of looks like dirt, so it almost looks like mud pie or something like that. And we just sprinkle it on, and you see how it really does look like dirt. So you're just going to spread it out. So see how easy that is? No baking. And you can add any kind of decorations you want to your enemy pie. Now, I think it's kind of fun, since it looks like dirt, to make it look like maybe you have flowers. Because you know what you find in dirt. In fact, one of the things you find in dirt are worms. So I happen to get some gummy worms. So I'm going to put some gummy worms on top of my pie. Now you can put them however you want. You could bury them in there and then cover them with dirt. I could have put the gummy worms down first even. And then maybe just had their heads poking out. You can get clever and do whatever you want. Now, I also went out and picked some flowers. And I did rinse them off. I washed them first. So these look like a little long of the stem. You can add flowers like that. And there are a lot of dandelions out now. And even though they're really weeds, they're so pretty. So you could even add a dandelion or two. Break off the stem and stick it in. And then these are just some greens. This isn't grass, these are just off my plants that are starting to die, those flowers. So you can add whatever you want. You can stick them in. Anyway, just wanted to show you there are all different kinds of things you can do to make your enemy pie look beautiful. And once you get it all done, you want to let it harden up again. So then you will just stick it right in your freezer. And there you will have your enemy pie all ready for dessert. And another thing you could do, if you want to have enemy cupcakes, you see I have some in here, some little crust of the Oreos that I'd added the butter to. I'm just going to take a scoop of this and put it right on top of here, so I will have a little cupcake as well. Now this would just be enough for one little individual serving. So you could do that. Add some more topping to it, just like we did before. Let me get my spoon and put this on there like so. And then you could even decorate your little cupcake. Add a worm to it, or add a flower to it. Be creative, have fun. But remember, the golden rule is called golden because it's so important to treat others the way you want to be treated. And if you want to look that up, it's in the 6th chapter of Luke in your Bible. There's so many good verses in there that have to do with friendship and even being kind to your enemies. So goodbye, boys and girls. See you next time.